I could easily see some Russian commanders accepting money from soldiers so that soldier gets to be a drone operator or stay in the command post. And soldiers who can't afford that bribe, they get sent out to go fight. So I could see some sort of popular rebellion happening, especially if soldiers just can't maintain those front lines anymore. And now you have guys who paid their bribe to the commander, and the commander says, well, you have to go anyway because we're out of people.
Ryan McBeth is a U.S. Army veteran and OSINT analyst. Welcome to our program, Ryan.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's always great to be on.
I would like to begin our session with probably Ukraine and this so-called negotiations to end the war in Ukraine and the global picture of this conflict. Who is winning and who is losing in this war right now, and how close are we to any kind of a deal?
That's an excellent question. I didn't know we were still talking about this war in terms of winning. I've often said that this isn't a question of win and lose. This is a question of who loses and who loses more. And I say that because when you take a look at a country like Ukraine, there is going to be veterans who are wounded, who are going to need psychological care. There is, even if Ukraine wins, or I should say loses less than Russia, we're going to have to make sure that the fields in the Donbass are demined. That's going to be going on for 50 years. I mean, today, in France, every once in a while, some guy's plowing his farmer's field and he finds a shell from World War I. So it's really tough to say the words win and lose because, in my opinion, both sides can lose. It's now a question of who loses more. And ideally, we want Russia to lose more. Now, when it comes to ending this or any kind of prospect of peace, I mean, Putin doesn't really see some sort of off-ramp, but Ukraine has to keep up with this fiction of going to these meetings, because if they don't, then President Trump will get mad. So I don't really see any sort of peace off-ramp that doesn't involve Putin ending up like the Ayatollah in Iran.
That's really interesting. From your perspective, does Vladimir Putin seek an end game, and can he really do this ceasefire without losing power?
I don't think so. The Russian economy is running red hot right now. And everybody who wants to be employed has a job, either in the military or in the military armaments manufacturing industry. So if the war ended tomorrow, many of those people would suddenly lose their jobs. Russia still wouldn't be able to sell its oil to anyone but China and, let's be honest here, Hungary, right? Maybe India. And, you might want to rearm, but you'll have other priorities. You're going to have hundreds of thousands of veterans who are suddenly out of a job. And granted, the gun laws in Russia are a lot different than the gun laws in the United States, but people who are angry always seem to be able to find a gun. So now you have all of these people who know how to use firearms. They are angry at how they were treated by the government. Perhaps their pension payments or their disability payments are late or non-existent because Russia doesn't have the money. And that's how you end up with a revolution like you saw in 1917. So, yeah, what I can see is President Putin might be looking at this sort of like Vietnam, the American involvement in Vietnam, where every single leader knew that there was no end in sight, but they kept, to use an American idiom, kicking the can down the road, making this a later problem, hoping that someone else will deal with it. And I think this is one of those things where Putin might try to keep this war going on as long as possible because it might be the only thing holding him in power right now.
Let's also cover interesting reporting by Bloomberg, because according to Bloomberg, Russia is ready to halt this war if Ukraine surrenders Donbas, the whole Donbas area, to Russia. Moreover, according to Bloomberg, most people from Putin's inner circle right now agree to end the war in case of Ukraine's withdrawal from the Donbas. What is your take on this so-called generous offer from Russian side?
Well, I don't have a take. This is the take of the Ukrainian people. And I shouldn't have a take as an American. This is something that Ukraine needs to vote on. They have shed blood for that particular area of their country. If they feel that this is an appropriate thing to cede to Russia in exchange for whatever peace there might be, then that's something they need to vote on. But as Americans, we shouldn't have any say in that whatsoever, because none of us died, other than the volunteers, none of us died fighting Russia. This should be decided by the Ukrainian people.
Really appreciate your kind words and honest position on this, because we have been hearing lots of opinions, takes about this Donbas area for a while. Lots of media analysts and interesting speakers saying what we should do or we should not do in this topic. Let's also cover more Russia and Vladimir Putin. We had this summit in Alaska, numerous phone calls, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner engaging with the Russian side. From your perspective, how close Russia is to any kind of, I wouldn't say collapse, but mutiny or something else, because they have reached interesting moment. Russian casualties have reached probably, they have lost probably 1.2, 1.3 million soldiers killed and wounded, according to most recent calculation. Could this backfire and create a window of opportunity for any kind of revolution, collapse inside Russian state?
There's always that possibility. I've often said a soldier is only 6 meals away from a bandit. If you have a gun and you haven't been fed in a couple of days, pretty soon you're going to find some food. And when you look at how Bashar al-Assad in Syria, how his army fell, it's actually fairly simple. Many soldiers would pay their commanders to keep them on the books, but let them leave and go work. So you had guys who were on the books as soldiers, and they would give their commander a couple of, God, I don't remember the unit of currency in Syria. I think it's dinar, that could be Iraq. So they give their soldiers a couple of dollars every month. They would go and work, but they wouldn't be at the front lines, but they're still on the rolls, on the books as being present at that unit. And if that happens enough, pretty soon you have a very hollow force. And now you only have soldiers who are there who can't afford the bribe. I could easily see some Russian commanders accepting money from soldiers, so that soldier gets to be a drone operator or stay in the command post. And soldiers who can't afford that bribe, they get sent out to go fight. So I could see some sort of popular rebellion happening, especially if soldiers just can't maintain those front lines anymore. And now you have guys who paid their bribe to the commander, and the commander says, well, you have to go anyway because we're out of people. If that starts happening on a very wide basis, then I think you could certainly see at least isolated pockets of rebellion.
And probably most final question on Ukraine and this war, because the war in Ukraine has entered its 5th year, and has lasted longer than Soviet Union's war against Nazi Germany during the Second World War. What does this tell you? And from your perspective, if we compare current situation with 2022, what has changed? And how can you assess Russia's objectives, which were achieved or not achieved by Russian side since 2022?
Boy, You know, a lot has changed since 2022. We've seen Russia attempt to storm its way into Ukraine, and of course that didn't work. We've seen Russia change their tactics on the fly to where they started to use drones more for artillery spotting and having that on-call artillery spotting, whereas the Russian military used to do what are called pre-planned fires. We've seen Russia take a look at the effectiveness of Ukrainian drones and say, you know what, we can do that as well. We've seen Russia essentially run out of, or at least have fewer strategic cruise missiles and use Iranian drones. So much has changed since the start of the war that the tactics have absolutely changed as well, to the point where now you have Ukrainian units who are using ground-based autonomous vehicles to take and hold ground. And that was something that wasn't even a concept back in 2022. In a lot of ways, it's almost like World War One, where at the start of World War One, you had young men versus machine guns, and by the end of World War One, you had tanks and you had aircraft dropping bombs. But I think the big difference between now and World War One is it seemed like in World War One the technology changed slowly. Young men, machine guns, and then poison gas was added, and then you had aircraft performing surveillance, and then you had aircraft dropping bombs, and then you had tanks. And I think now things are changing about every 6 to 8 weeks on the ground. The tech is changing every 6 to 8 weeks, which is really an incredible rate of advancement.
And also would like to hear your take on drone warfare and how has the war in Ukraine changed this whole air power, air warfare in the matter of drones?
I'm actually I have a video that I'm going to do about that fairly soon. The it's changing in the way that people see what drones can be. And one of the things that you have to realize is that now the entire battlefield is open. There is a term called masking that we use in the US Army. And masking means essentially hiding your vehicle, but not just hiding it from visual identification, hiding it from thermal, hiding it from radio emissions, hiding it in the ultraviolet spectrum. So, what Ukraine has shown is that we need to evaluate the entire spectrum when thinking about masking. We might have to go underground. The days of giant command centers are essentially over because that will get found and targeted within minutes. Now, the one thing I think is a little bit different is that drones today are being used by Ukraine because essentially we didn't give them enough artillery in 2022, 2023. And so they had to say, you know what, we're going to start using these small drones because we can manufacture them very quickly, get some of the parts from China, although today a lot of those parts are made inside of Ukraine. One of my biggest fears and a takeaway for NATO is that the next war might not look like Ukraine. Drones are going to be a component, but that doesn't mean every single soldier needs a drone and drones are going to be the only game in town. No, tanks still have purpose and value. Aircraft still have value. The average infantryman still has value. And I believe that in the next 5 years, counter drone systems are going to be so good that drones are just going to be another component of warfare, just not the only game in town the way we see on the battlefields in Ukraine.
You just mentioned about tanks. Right now, we remember this, 2022, 2023 discussions why Ukraine should receive, why US should donate to Ukraine US Abrams tanks. Why didn't these tanks work in Ukraine? I mean, Abrams Leopards. Why didn't they change the game? And why did they were so, fragile and so unprotected against drones?
Well, I think that the big issue is that when the United States fights, we tend to fight with complete air dominance. So one of the things that I've often said is that if the United States could go into actually the U.S. really NATO could attack Russia tomorrow, and their air defense would be attrited, would be destroyed within 36 hours. And you look at Iran, right? You look how quickly we established air dominance over Iran. You look how quickly Israel, a smaller nation, established air dominance over Iran in under 12 days. The United States is one of the few countries on the planet. There's only two countries that actually have dedicated platforms that hunt surface-to-air missiles. United States and China. Those are the only two countries that have planes that just do this surface-to-air missile destruction mission, or SEAD. And essentially, this is like sending the mice to catch the cat, where you have fighters go up and you try to find these surface-to-air missile systems, and when they detect you, you fire a missile at that surface-to-air missile system that homes in on the radar beacon, and then you go in with cluster bombs and finish them off. That's part of the United States' doctrine, right? We establish complete air dominance, and then afterwards we can do anything you want. And I think the Abrams and the Leopard, they didn't really work in Ukraine, because in order to make that happen, you need to have total air dominance over the adversary. And then now you're fighting in an unfair battle where you have highly advanced tanks going up against tanks that are not quite so advanced or well protected. But you need that air component to work first. One huge problem that came from Russia was that their helicopters were allowed to operate near the front. And those helicopters were able to launch anti-tank missiles at soldiers who were on the counteroffensive. These are in Bradleys or in tanks. And it didn't work because there wasn't that air dominance. As we've seen during the first Gulf War, once you establish that air dominance, you can do absolutely anything you want. And I think that was kind of the biggest problem there. It wasn't lack of maintenance. It wasn't Ukraine didn't know how to use them. They knew how to use them. They just didn't have that complete air dominance that allowed them to dominate on the ground as well.
You also mentioned about US capable of establishing air dominance over Russia by destroying air defenses in case of such conflict. Why are you so confident that US would be able to establish such air dominance over Russia, because they have lots of this S-300, S-400 air defense systems? Would it be so easy just to, go all in, destroy air defense systems and bomb Russian state?
Yes. I hate to put yes. It would be. Now, when I say easy, right? Everything in war is hard. You have deconfliction issues. Stuff. That doesn't mean stuff isn't going to get shot down. But there are entire units. For example, the 77th Squadron out of South Carolina, the Gamblers. You can throw that graphic up if you can search for them. The Gamblers, their entire job is to hunt down surface-to-air missile systems. That's all they do. And when the United States went into Venezuela, first thing we did is the SEAD, suppression of enemy air defense aircraft. They go in first. They blind the enemy's radar, and it would just be this. Overwhelming wave. There's a tactic we practice now called JADO, or Joint All Domain Operations. And during the first Gulf War, we had this strategy called Airland 2000. And that was massive airstrikes for about 6 weeks, followed by a massive ground invasion. That was our strategy for defeating Russia. We would, if the Soviet Union ever invaded West Germany, we would try to slow them down on the ground. We would establish air dominance, and then we would counterattack. And that was part of Airland Battle 2000, this fusion of air and land. Today, our JADO doctrine, Joint All Domain Operations doctrine, emphasizes moving air, land, space, sea, and cyber all at once. Instead of a hurricane followed by a tidal wave, we give the adversary 1,000 tornadoes. The amount of stuff, the amount of aircraft we can put in the air, and not only put in the air, but sustain over multiple days and weeks is astronomical. And that's just not something Russia has ever had to deal with. I think Ukraine has roughly 120 or so, 130 aircraft, roughly. Russia has maybe 500 working aircraft right now. They haven't been able to gain air dominance over Ukraine. So I think a lot of it comes down to we are so good at establishing air dominance over a state that once we establish that air dominance, everything else can be rolled up fairly quickly.
And also it's interesting that Russia has failed to establish this air dominance over Ukraine and couldn't do this. There have been also lots of discussions about the possibility of direct war between NATO and Russia, US, Russia, NATO in Europe. What are the Russia's chances against US-led NATO in case of such war? Will US win this conflict?
So again, you got to stop thinking about win and lose. There's lose and lose, right? Because both sides can still lose, especially if nuclear weapons are somehow employed. I've been to multiple NATO events. I feel pretty confident that NATO would have a maneuver advantage and an air advantage over anything that Russia can throw at it. You have to remember, I believe NATO's total forces in NATO are around, I think, 2.1 million forces. And Europe itself, I believe, is 1.1 million. If we don't include Turkey, it goes down a little bit. But just there, they have an overwhelming capability over Russia. The issue is really whether everyone can get on the same page. I've often said that NATO is like an unstoppable snail, you know. But once they get moving, watch out, because we can really do some damage.
Let's also cover the most interesting developments right now going on in the Middle East. And my first question would be probably a simple one. What is going on in the Middle East?
A lot's going on. I think that what we have right now is a president who is done. Iran has been the bad neighbor of the Middle East for 47 years now. They killed Americans, or they helped fund killing Americans in Lebanon. They took Americans hostage in 1979. They tried to shut down the Straits of Hormuz in 1987, I believe. They helped fund proxy militias, the Hezbollah and Hamas in Israel. They helped fund the Houthis in Yemen, shooting rockets at ships in the Red Sea. They helped fund operations in Syria, oppressing the people under Bashar al-Assad. They are like that neighbor that beats their wife and spanks their kids, and you call the police and the police come and they don't do anything. Well, there's a new sheriff in town, and that sheriff is about to issue an eviction notice for Iran. And getting rid of the regime in Iran would essentially solve a problem that's been 47 years in the making. So I think what we have going on here is President Trump, whether you like him or not, has seen an opportunity. Iran is the weakest it's been in 47 years. And this is an opportunity to just push over that first domino and watch all the other dominoes fall. It just needs that little push.
From your perspective, is this regime change objective is credible one and possible one due to the fact that US hesitates to commit ground forces in Iran?
I don't personally think it is. And I say that because Iran is kind of unique. Iran has two militaries. They have the IRGC, the Islamic Republican Guard Corps, which is sort of like the religious military, and they have the Artesh, which is the Army of the People. Every Iranian male is drafted into the military. They don't normally get a choice on where they go. Some go to the IRGC, some go to the Artesh. The Artesh is significantly larger than the IRGC, but the IRGC has better funding. So I believe the strategy here is that we keep hitting IRGC and Basiji, which is sort of like a religious militia, the Basiji targets and IRGC targets. And this will allow the Artesh to say, you know what? We can settle some old scores. And that's when they get in their tanks and drive to Tehran and shoot anybody who's in an IRGC or Basiji uniform. I think that's kind of the plan there. So we don't necessarily need ground troops because the people of Iran will do it for us.
There have been some accusations and interesting discussions that on social media that Israel has, dragged U.S. in this fight. Marco Rubio said that they didn't have any kind of other option but to join the fight because Israel would join the fight. What's your take on that?
I mean, that's an interesting thing to say. And don't forget, one of the bases of President Trump's support are conservative Jews in America who highly support Israel. So sometimes you're saying things just to kind of say them. And that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't some truth to that. This could have been a situation where Israel said, you know what, we're going to go in and do this. This will be a lot easier if you help out. And the United States said, you know what, this is an excellent opportunity. Because I think one of the big fears, there's a couple of things here. I think one of the big fears that we see is that Iran starts causing trouble right when China decides to invade Taiwan. And also by taking out Iran now, we've just eliminated another source of Chinese oil. We eliminated one source of Chinese oil by taking out Venezuela. Taking out Iran, I believe that's 20% roughly of China's oil. So that is a significant stockpile of oil. And it just makes it harder for China to invade Taiwan. So I think this is one of those things where it's just the right time to perform an operation like this. And Israel might have been a deciding factor. They certainly could have been a contributing factor.
For how long can U.S. sustain this intensive air campaign? And for how long should they sustain this campaign to achieve any kind of objectives, right? Because they're also, I don't know, maybe running low on missiles, because it's a really interesting topic to discuss, how many missiles they still have for this battle, for this fight.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And it's one of the reasons why you see the United States and Israel going after ballistic missile targets. This is actually one of the problems that we've seen in Ukraine. Everybody went and gave Ukraine defensive missiles. That's great. But it's better to kill the archer than it is to try to stop the arrow, right? It's better to destroy the missiles in the missile launchers than it is to try to hit that missile when it is being fired at one of your cities. So one of the things you have to realize is that when we're hitting these missile launchers, we're typically doing them with laser. We're typically hitting them with laser-guided bombs. So we have plenty of those things. I mean, this is just a bolt-on kit. You put the kit on the missile, and this thing can guide it on a laser. JDAM is the same way. It is a kit that you put on the front and back. We have plenty of those. We have plenty of dumb munitions. Now, I've often said that if America doesn't stop shooting $2 million cruise missiles at camels, we're all going to be speaking Chinese in 10 years. We need to save those high-end Tomahawk missiles. We need to save those high-end interceptors for threats coming from China in the next couple of years. And that's one of the reasons we're going after those missile launchers. But after a week or so, we're probably going to see a heck of a lot fewer missile launches, because we've either destroyed all the TELs, the transport erector launchers, or we've destroyed the command and control that tells people when and where to launch and at whom. So if you don't have that command and control, you're not going to launch a missile, right? No one's going to launch a missile because they feel they have the authorization in their heart, right? They get those commands from someplace else. So if you've destroyed the chain of command, you've effectively taken out that missile launcher. So I think we can keep this up for quite a few weeks without really delving that deep into our stockpile of precision-guided weapons and of surface-to-air interceptors and cruise missiles, just because the nature of the mission is at the point where we've destroyed Iran's surface-to-air missile defenses to the point where we can fly with impunity and drop dumb iron bombs or laser-guided bombs or satellite-guided bombs without needing to send a cruise missile into a more dangerous area.
And most final question, and I would appreciate as short answer as possible. Would Iran be able to create nuclear weapons after this U.S. campaign?
Well, if Iran is no longer run by the Ayatollah, then they might say, you know what, we're not going to do this. We're going to buy an American General Electric Westinghouse reactor, buy the fuel from them, and have our nuclear power. There's no need for Iran to enrich uranium. There's none. But one of the things that you have to understand is that building a nuclear weapon isn't that hard. You just need the uranium, and this tech has been around since the 1940s. You send a donut of uranium into a slug of uranium, that creates critical mass. So Iran could very easily create a nuclear weapon because the tech isn't that difficult. The hard part is enriching it, which appears they've already done. So I think Iran could certainly create a nuclear weapon if they chose to do so, and we are hell-bent on preventing them from doing that.
Thank you, Ryan, for your time and for your support for Ukraine and insightful answers, and glory to Ukraine.
Thank you so much for inviting me.